What's up everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to do a video all specifically about film and do a little Q&A session. This is technically my second one on my channel, but make it all film specific because I've just been doing a ton of videos on film recently. I've been shooting a lot of film recently. I've been posting a lot of film photos recently. So like I said, that's what I wanted today's focus to be. Is there ever a video that does not have Hope making a guest appearance? No. Alrighty. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Alright, so the first question is, how do I decide when to shoot film or to shoot digital? And this is kind of a loaded question because as many questions are answered, it depends. In general, when I shoot anything for someone else, so family, friends, you know, a potential client, I always choose to shoot digital, and I actually shoot that on my Olympus system. I love the workflow of it, the way I can edit the raw photos. It's just something that I'm very comfortable with, so I've always stuck with it. As far as kind of the casual everyday moments, which I talk about this in every single video, but a lot of what I shoot obviously for fun is gonna be the everyday moments that I want to get on camera. Typically I do steer towards film. I just prefer the way that it looks. I like the workflow of it. I like knowing that it was shot on film. I think there's something really special about that. But that being said, there are times that I can't justify using an entire roll of film. Maybe I just want to go out for a few shots, or there's a very specific scene and want to go get a picture of it, then I will typically bring out my X Pro 2. Another thing is, if I am only going to shoot one roll, I typically mail in to develop multiple rolls of film at a time. So if there's only one roll is really worth and it's just gonna sit there for a while, I opt towards digital. But I would say in general my preference is film. I just think film is very cool and I'm very biased towards film. The second is my favorite focal length. I only have two main focal lengths that I shoot with on film, and really it's only one. I have a 28mm lens and a 50mm lens for my Olympus system, and I mean, I love the 50mm. I'm very comfortable with it now. I think it's the perfect balance of it being long versus wide enough. There are very rare situations where that focal length does not work, but I would say 95% of situations that I shoot, I can get on that 50mm lens. The third question is, where do I store unused film? The first option is obviously the refrigerator. This is something that, again, I grew up with, and I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but my parents always had unused film in the fridge that, you know, is now expired, but it's always been sitting there. It still is sitting there. However, I also find that I do shoot film frequently enough to keep a handful of rolls outside of the refrigerator, and I'll use them within a few months of purchasing them and have never had an issue with that. That being said, sometimes it is annoying to have film in the fridge because when you take it out, you have to kind of let it thaw to room temperature in the container that it's in, like the little plastic container, to avoid condensation affecting the actual film. And again, this has never happened to me, so this is only what I've read online, but that's something to keep note of if you do keep it in the fridge, which is why sometimes I just like storing it next to me on my desk. So number 4 is the biggest learning opportunity that I have gotten from film. There's really two parts to this answer. One is from a more technical photographer's perspective, and one is simply just a personal thing that I have learned. From the side of being a photographer, film is essentially what taught me how to shoot in manual, and I say that because when you shoot digitally, even with the lower end cameras these days, shooting everything in auto is supported. So auto exposure, selecting your aperture, you can literally put it on auto mode and never know what ISO, aperture, or shutter speed even mean. And so while that's something that's very cool for people who want to get into photography and feel like it's such a big learning curve, it's a great option to get you into photography and start practicing just like simple compositions. But on the other end, I, got to the point where I was using it really as a crutch and never feeling like I needed to learn the actual manual controls of photography, and my photos have drastically improved since I have done so. So film is what obviously forced me to do that, because I had a older SLR with nothing auto, no autofocus, no auto settings. I mean, it is aperture priority, but you still have to know each of the 3 settings to be able to successfully shoot even with aperture priority mode. So that is what it taught me from a technical perspective. As far as from just a simple like life lesson, I guess, it's really helped me appreciate the everyday moments. And again, this is something I talk about so much on my channel, especially for photographers who are literally just hobbyist photographers. You don't shoot clients, you don't make a living shooting photography, you just want to shoot things for fun. And a lot of times it is easy to get in a funk when you're not forced to go out and shoot things, but to actually start recognizing that the most simple moments in your life can become the most beautiful images is something that I have really, really embraced thanks to film photography. And I 100% do not think I would be at that point if I had never started shooting film. Okay, so number 5 is how much of your film process translates to digital or vice versa. So I actually did a video on my end-to-end film process, and I would say in general most of it does translate over. As far as the actual shooting process, it's pretty much exactly the same. Obviously it depends on your focal length that you're using, but when it comes to the actual shooting, how I determine settings, what I like to shoot, what compositions I typically go for, it's all the exact same from film to digital. The only difference between the 2 workflows are simply pre-shooting and then post-production. So like I mentioned in my video, there's a lot that goes into choosing and setting up how you're going to shoot film, whether you're choosing Filmstocks, whether you're choosing your camera. Where film, my lens is pretty much the same every single time, whereas digital, I have a few different options that I can choose from depending on what vibe I think I'm gonna want to go for, or I just bring all of them. And then on the post-production side, obviously my film lab does all of the processing and scanning for me, and I rarely actually edit my film photos. And then for digital photos, I obviously am the one who's kind of in charge of archiving things, uploading things from the SD card, editing in Lightroom, and then anywhere between delivering to the end user or kind of figuring out how I'm going to store them digitally myself. Number 6 is any film you would like to test but haven't yet. When I originally got this question, it made me think of a film. So since then, I have purchased and shot a roll of Lomo 400. That was kind of the main one for me because when I was in high school, when I started my photography journey, I really loved the cooler color tones, and I would always edit my photos that way. So Lomo 400 has a little bit more of the cooler undertone, so I really wanted to try that Filmstock, which obviously is very different from something like a Kodak Ultramax Gold or Portra. Like I said, I've shot that roll since. It has been mailed off to my film lab, so I'm waiting for the scans back. So I have no idea how that's going to turn out, but if I had to choose another one that I actually have not shot, I would probably go with Ektar 100. I think 100 is a very interesting box speed for me in the way that I shoot, so I don't really know how that's gonna go. But I've seen such beautiful images come out of it. I've heard it's really great for landscapes, which is what I really love shooting. So I think Ektar 100 would definitely be the way to go. So number 7 is film photographers that inspire me. So right off the bat, there are probably like 3 that I can think of, and I'm gonna pull them up. So the first is Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams is the reason why I fell in love with photography and landscape photography to begin with. I'm not gonna harp on him too much, but he will always hold a special place in my heart when it comes to my photography journey, because he probably is the main person that I was inspired by. That being said, I'm not huge on black and white photography. I'm not huge specifically on black and white landscape photography. So in that way it's a little bit different, but I think reading his stories are really inspiring. In terms of more modern film photographers, there are 3 that I really like. And they're not necessarily specific to film, but they are very similar to my shooting style and the way that I choose between film and digital and the scenes that I like to shoot. So the first is Tyler Trudeau. The second is Bray Hunziker, I think is how you pronounce his name. And the third is Samuel Elkins, who is someone that I actually used to follow back in high school during that photography phase of mine, but have now recently just gotten really re-inspired by because of his kind of combination of film and digital. They're all very up my alley in terms of the style of landscapes that they like to shoot, the colors that they go after, the way they edit their photos, their compositions. I am just very much into. Bray and Samuel Elkins specifically, they have YouTube channels. I don't know about Tyler. But that's a really cool way to see behind the scenes stuff of them shooting. So number 8 is, do I edit my film photos? If so, what do I do? And again, I touched upon this on my last video, which I think went up before this question was asked, but essentially I do not edit my film photos. The main one that I have ever edited was, I will pop it right here on the screen, and it is a picture of Mount Rainier, or Rainier, however you pronounce it, and it was on a super cloudy day, so the mountain itself was very much blurred into the background of the sky. I don't love it. It's not my favorite picture that I've ever taken, but I do think that it's cool the amount that I was able to edit it to get it to that point, because again, normally I don't edit my film photos. So last question that I got asked, I actually got asked this more than one time, and that is the true cost of shooting film, or how much it is per roll. So I'm gonna bring up my phone calculator here, and we're gonna do the math together, because I've thought about it a lot, but I have never actually sat down and put like a dollar and cents amount to each roll. Starting off is, of course, purchasing your roll of film. I'm gonna base this number off of Portra 400 because it is a more expensive film stock to purchase, and that will typically run me about $10 per roll. So next is obviously the cost of processing and scanning it. With Indie Film Lab, one roll of 35mm film is $11 to develop and scan if you choose the cheapest options. From there, if you want to get your negatives back, it kind of depends on how many rolls you send in at once. So essentially your entire order you'll get back for $9. So typically I send in about 3 rolls. That's what I found is my sweet spot, unless I'm traveling and have just a bunch of photos that I took from a specific trip. On a day-to-day regular life basis, I do 3 rolls at a time, so $9 divided by 3 is $3 to get those negatives back. And then on top of that is the cost to mail your film into them, which I typically choose. Again, on a normal basis, I'll choose the cheapest option, which is USPS first class mail. On average, the shipments I do are $4.95 per box, so that's 3 rolls. I'm gonna leave it at like $1.50 per roll just to overcharge it and account for any tax or anything else that's included. So that gets me to $25.50 per roll, which is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Film is not cheap. Film doesn't make a lot of sense for most people, I would say. And I've talked about this on my channel before, and I want to end off with this because I think there is a little bit of hesitation and maybe even a little bit of controversy about how expensive film is, especially if you do it as a hobby and don't have someone like paying you back for the materials. But $25 per roll, again, is an extravagant amount of money, and it's a privilege to be able to shoot film. That being said, I think it's 100% worth it to try at some point. And for me, like where people would budget money to going out for dinner or hanging out with friends or purchasing clothes or whatever else people spend money on, like even a gym membership. I don't have a gym membership. All of those different miscellaneous areas of spending that other people may prioritize, I prioritize shooting film. I think it's done an incredible job in terms of transforming my photography and the way I take photos, the way I think about taking photos, and just the types of photos that I've gotten out of it. So I think it's an amazing investment for me, but I don't want to harp on it for too long. I just did want to spend some time to kind of chit chat about that, especially if you are someone who's very hesitant about film or looking to get into film and want to know what that cost will look like. So those are all the questions that I will be answering for this film Q&A. Again, thank you to everyone who has sent in questions. I really appreciate the engagement. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave your comments down below, and if you're interested in content like this and other photography content, be sure to subscribe to my channel, because that is what my channel is all about, and I will see you all in my next video.